This is another game that I played with my Astral Communion Druid deck. So this hand that I'm starting off with has two Astral Communions and a Darnassus Aspirant. And that's a good thing to draw because when I play Astral Communion, well, first of all, I'm going to get my Aspirant onto the board. Uh, and so instead of just losing a card or spending a wild growth to ramp up to play the Astral Communion faster, I'm actually getting that body ahead of my Astral Communion. So that's a nice thing to have in an opening hand if it lives through the opponent's second turn and is able to provide me with that extra mana for my Astral Communion. Against a warrior, that's a dicey proposition because of Fiery War Axe. Uh, right now, he's not passing, so I'm waiting for him to end his turn, and then I'm going to play that Darnassus Aspirant. These are two cards that I don't really want to see in my hand, Nourish and Ancient of Lore, when I'm about to play Astral Communion, because losing those, and then there's a third card I don't want to see, but I'm going to do it anyway, because if I lose the Aspirant, I wouldn't be able to do anything until Nourish on turn 5. And I have two Astro Communions in my hand, so I already have two cards less than my opponent. So I want to go ahead and I have the 2/3 on the board. The Death Rattle no longer matters because when he dies, I'll just get the Mana Crystal back the next turn. So I now have a 2/3 on the board and 10 Mana Crystals. But he has a handful of cards, and I don't know what kind of warrior he is yet. So I'm going to play whatever I draw now because I can't uh, lose the pace of pushing this game forward by just playing whatever's in my hand. Obviously, I know a warrior has a lot of ways to kill a big minion, uh, and he's got to. He can't just let this sit on the board. He's got plenty of armor right now. He can shield slam. If he can deal it a damage, he can execute it. Uh, so that's what I'm up against with warrior, and it can be a very tough matchup for this if his removal can keep pace with my minions. But the good thing about this deck versus Warrior is when you play Astral Communion, there aren't a lot of minions he can get good value for with the weapons that are a big part of a Warrior's removal kit. Fiery War Axe doesn't do anything to Ancient of War, but Cruel Taskmaster plus Execute is going to remove him from the board. And so I'm back to top decking with my 10 mana crystals. He can't do anything else. He's got 1 mana. So he's going to wait it out. There's a Wild Growth. Wild Growth is not a bad thing to draw after playing Astral Communion, because when you play it when you have full mana crystals, you get an excess mana, which is a 0 cost spell that lets you draw cards. So it cycles itself at the cost of you having 2 less mana that turn. And you could draw something that costs 9 mana in this deck. I've got Nefarian, and I've got Ysera, and I've got Cenarius in it. But honestly, getting those is a good thing, even if it does cost you a turn. And this time I got the Ancient of War, which seems like it's lucky to get 2 of them. But, I mean, there are a number of threats. And so now it is, you know, turn 6 for him. And he's facing an Ancient of War. He's already had to use his Taskmaster and his Execute on the first one he faced on turn 3. And he's got Dr. Boom and Ancient of War on the board on his 6th turn. And so he's obviously at a huge disadvantage here. And he's trying to think about how he can deal with his board. So since I hit him with the Ancient of War last turn, he doesn't have enough armor to kill it outright with Shield Slam. He's going to have to trade his minion and use a Shield Slam. The warrior has 4 direct removal kits, or 4 direct removal spells in his kit. He can execute twice, and he can shield slam twice. And control warriors are really good at keeping the board clear against a deck that plays on a normal curve. That Shield Maiden is usually a great value. She's a 5/5 for 6, and she gives you 5 armor, which you can use to power your shield slams. Plus, she can usually trade into 2 smaller minions and get you huge value. But against a deck like this, Shield Slam isn't an effective use of a card if you can't maintain armor against this board. And there are so many viable targets for removal that he can't take them all out, and his weapons aren't going to be effective. So I got lucky on the Brawl, but it wouldn't have mattered because he's used his Brawl because he didn't have any other removal for Dr. Boom. Uh, and he had to trade in Shield Slam because he couldn't have risked leaving the Ancient of War on the board and not having an answer for it. And I knew now that he's out of answers, so I was free to play Chromagus, and now I have 2 Nefarians. And Nefarian just gave me an execute. So I'm going to use Dr. Boom, who's already used his Battle Cry and is just a body now to protect Chromagus from his minion. And now I've got Nefarian, who's an 8/8. I got another Nefarian in my hand. I got 10 mana, and he's still only at 8. I've completely turned the card disadvantage of discarding my hand at the beginning of the game around. I now have 3 in play, and he's going to surrender because there's no more removal in his deck. And as you can see, I am winning with this crazy deck with 10 legendaries at rank 10.